Welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. Join me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, for real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal, how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and masculine, you learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
Together, working at a practical level, you learn to trust that everything that is happening is for you, your growth, and ultimate freedom.
Our circumstances don't matter. It's only how we relate to them that does.
Get ready to befriend the wisdom of your body and the power of your mind.
Break Free and Trust starts now.
Hey, welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jacqueline.
Why do you find it so hard to receive help when it's offered? Why do you have this compulsion to try to do it on your own? Struggling to receive help and being uncomfortable asking for help are often visible manifestations of deep-seated and unconscious limiting beliefs that are in the driver's seat of your life. In this episode, Jacqueline and I are going to discuss our own unique journeys with these maladaptive behaviors. How did they impact our lives? What were the limiting beliefs? And what was the catalyst for change? And as always, ways for you to bring awareness to your own predicament and tools to make changes yourself. All this and much more in the next hour. And of course, for viewers, the show is live and open to questions in the second half. So please call in at 1-800-930-2819 or just write your questions in the chat. Why don't we just jump right into it, Jacqueline? Why do our listeners find it so difficult to receive help when it's offered? What do we mean by this?
Well, I'm not going to presume that I know what gets in the way of you being able to receive help. But I'll share some ideas. I think first and foremost, any willingness to receive help inevitably means that I need help. And the assumption that I need help means that I don't have it together. I don't have what I need in order to push through or to make it through something. And the assumption then becomes, what's wrong with me that I can't do it by myself? It's the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask the question.
Yeah. And then that's receiving help. And so following that line, asking for help is even a doubly more challenging if that's the case.
I actually think they're one and the same. I think being able to ask for help and receive help are equally difficult depending on where you're at, and they're equally simple depending on where you're at. Do you have a different idea?
I guess I would say one is passive, one is active. So I think the bar can be a little bit higher for the asking. And I think there's also, and we'll get into this in the show, there's a masculine and feminine element at work potentially, where in my experience, men in particular have a tremendously hard time asking for help and have a little bit of an easier time receiving help when it's offered.
I think that might be true from the standpoint of masculine and feminine tendencies, but I don't think that it's true necessarily about men and women. I think that our unconscious programming that we've talked about many times before is much more of an indicator of whether or not you will be able to receive or ask for help than your gender. But that's from where I sit.
To be explored. And I think one of the things when we were chatting about, this topic before the show, is this idea that, there's lots of different types of conditioning people have from different upbringings and different places, but this seems to be one that has a common thread associated with it. This seems to be one of those areas that, most people have some conditioning in this fashion, where whether it be different people or different groups, but the receiving help and asking for help has shown up to challenge some place in their life.
I think that's really true in our culture. I'm not sure that that's true in other cultures. And I won't make the assumption that it is. But in our culture, I think you're absolutely right. But we grow up in a culture where, the idea of success, achievement, and all of those things are so significant that we want to play a part. We want to look good. We want to look like we've got our shit together. We want to not need anything from anybody else. And at the end of the day, what we have is a society filled with really lonely, isolated people um, whose mental health are far worse than it was 20 years ago. And so the idea of being able to actually broach the subject and really look at what it means to ask for help and what it means to receive help feels like a really important step in moving forward in terms of creating community and also unmasking.
Yeah, and you made a really good point about this, not making assumptions about other cultures or other groups. And in fact, it's a good reminder that, we've talked about this in the show before. We are only subject matter experts in our own experience.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good place to start. Let's build up our own experience and move out from there. And so why don't I ask you? You've brought this up in previous shows. This idea of identifying as sort of very self-sufficient and competent is something we've discussed in other shows. Want to get into that a little bit?
Sure. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure about the competent piece. I would say self-sufficient and capable were words
Capable.
that,
That's that. I was remembering it was the word from your, like, you're talking about your dad's wedding speech. Capable is the word he used. Not okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Um, yeah. So I mean, I think we all have the experiences that we have and whatever experiences we have in childhood that lead us to particular patterns or ways of being or beliefs, limiting beliefs, let's say, or core beliefs that we have about ourselves. And I've learned a lot. I mean, you've walked with me a lot through a lot of these over the last number of years. And I've learned a lot in the past few months, even around where some of this sits. So when I was 18 months old, and you know what? Well, I'll tell the story and then I'll tell you why this story is irrelevant. When I was 18 months old, my mom was pregnant with my sister, and my sister was dying in my mom's belly. And she needed to go into the hospital to go on bed rest to save my sister's life. And what she did was she just left. I was too young to really understand. She was afraid for me to be hurt by the whole situation or to panic. And so she just thought it best that she left. And I wasn't allowed to go visit because she didn't want to upset me too much. So all that said, she does her thing to try and protect me. But the experience that I have is one of my mom's just disappeared and I don't know where she's gone. So over the years, I had all kinds of stories about that experience and how that must have impacted me. And I think I don't know, I've done a lot of work over the last few years. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that actually my story is kind of irrelevant. And the story itself about what happened is irrelevant. What was relevant was that in that moment, I experienced a feeling of terror. I was absolutely gripped in fear. And I didn't know how to be with fear. Like most of us when we're kids, when something happens that threatens our attachment, we adapt to try and be what we need to be in order for our attachment figure to come closer. And mine was gone. And I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know how to be with fear. And so what I learned how to do was turn away from myself and away from my own experience and turn toward all the people around me in terms of what their needs were and what was happening for them. Because as long as I was focused outside of myself, I didn't have to feel my own fear.
What was the fear?
So I can tell you in this body right now what I think it was.
For sure.
I think I was afraid I was going to die.
Right.
I mean, in my mind's eye, I have this idea of like looking around in panic at a room and not knowing where I am or who I am without this parental figure present. And what I told myself from a core belief standpoint was, I'm not important. And it wasn't, I'm not important to my mother. I'm not important to my father. It was, I'm not important. Don't focus on yourself. Focus outside on what's important. Because as long as you do, you don't have to feel these feelings. And so my life was built around this idea of look outward, tend to the outside world, create harmony in your home, be a good girl, do the things that make everybody else around you good, and distract from your own experience.
Within that, is there an element of, if I also do all these things for, like, in this sense, it feels like within the story, there may be a feeling of abandonment too at the time. And if I do all these things for other people, they'll be there for me.
I think that might be a little bit more of your story.
It might be, yeah.
And we'll get to your story. I think I don't think it was a fear of, I was definitely abandoned. Or at least I interpreted it that way in that at that time.
As a kid, how could you not, right?
I think what it was as long as I'm no trouble, because the words that came out of my mouth when my mom came back were no more bottle, no more diaper,
Yeah.
no more baby.
Yeah.
I toilet trained myself, I weaned myself off a bottle, and I wasn't
I'm not a
sleeping in
burden.
crib
I'm not a
anymore.
burden anymore.
I'm not a burden. I got my shit together.
Yeah.
Check me out.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that without even being aware of it, I walked through life like that. I walked through life with this idea that as long as I was superwoman, super mom, super whatever, that the fear that sat underneath my system wouldn't get me. I think that that's like, actually, when I really think about it, I think about, like, when we're kids, we talk about the boogeyman.
Yeah.
I think fear was the boogeyman for me.
Yeah. And it's almost like that you're doing all this as like this addiction, an
100%.
addiction to doing all these things to stay out of fear. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
But I think I actually, as we were talking about on the weekend, I think that all of us have found our way to manage deep feelings that we didn't know how to process as kids by engaging in behaviors, masks, ways of being that are no different, actually, than addictions. They just look different because there is a massive act of either avoidance or suppression that each one of us, and I'll tell you, like, my childhood was a really happy childhood for in lots of ways. I had lots of pain and all kinds of other stuff like most people, but I don't have these huge traumas that I experienced. But I have lots of behaviors. And I see them. I see different behaviors in my clients, in my friends, in our kids. I think it's part of the human condition, is this inherent avoidance of pain. And we move toward what makes us feel good. And yet, then the thing that sits under the surface is unconsciously driving everything we do. Yeah. And so, coming back to the original question, I would say it's very hard to receive or to ask for help if you've created a construct in your life where asking for help means that you don't have it together, or that there's something wrong with you, or that you don't have any value, or that it brings up questions of worth or significance. Being able to receive help means a willingness to actually say that I need help.
Right.
And we need to do a lot of, I don't know, I can still see, I have this image of this big stone that was in a movie about Joseph Campbell's work around the hero's journey. And it's like, you keep knocking the stone with a chisel and a hammer only to get to the golden Buddha that sits underneath it. And I think for all of us, it actually takes a lot of hammering and chiseling to get to the place where we recognize that to ask for help and to need help is human. We didn't come here to be on our own. We didn't come here to function as islands. We came here to live in community and to serve each other. But to get there requires first being able to actually look at ourselves and see the masks that we've put on.
Yes, you're doing all this. So the way you described it, you're doing all this externalizing, going outside of yourself, and almost a sort of self-sacrificing and discounting your own needs as a way to feel worth, as a way to see validation, because you don't want to ask for help and then take a look inside and face the fact that there's part of you that feels like their fears are not worth anything, beliefs are not enough, and asking for help. It's almost like having to face that in some way. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's making it hard for me to swallow to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Because yes and no. I don't think that's what I said, but I think that's what I said.
Right.
Okay. So, and I want to qualify that for our listeners for a second, because I do not believe that these behaviors are something that are done consciously. I think that for most of us, these are unconscious programs that are running our lives and driving our cars, if you will. And it's only once we start to step back and really take a good look at ourselves that we begin to see that our behaviors are not driven by what we think they're driven by, but often they're driven by something that we've relegated to the shadows. So I say that because when you spoke and you said, so these behaviors that were like you were self-sacrificing, and you were outward looking and externalizing, I was doing a lot of those things. And I can see that in retrospect.
Right. Yes.
You know, one of my teachers speaks a lot about this wheel of sacrifice that we find ourselves on, and we can come back to that because I think it's actually it's endemic in our society, particularly with women, and you'll say also with men. So I think it's on both sides, but it's done in a way that we've masked it even from ourselves, particularly from ourselves, actually. So yes.
I mean, yeah, I'm fully with you. Like I think this is the interesting thing, is that until we become conscious of it, our operating system, our programming is almost wholly unconscious, and the reasons of the things that you're doing or I'm doing, they're almost obscure to us in the moment, and then we look back after going through something and like, oh, now I see it. Now I see what was driving this bus all along. It's certainly not what I thought it was.
And I think the biggest blind spot always, and we spoke about this in a different podcast and you spoke about it actually, is the biggest blind spot around this stuff is our own blind spot. Other people start to see a little bit of what's going on with us far before we do. Yeah.
What?
But go ahead.
I'm just curious. Like, so we sort of brought in the word addiction because it has parallels to it. But going through life and sort of, I'm gonna use the word because we're using it. This identity of self-sacrifice, in a sense, it actually doesn't lead to some blow up in our life, some hard bottom. And in fact, in a lot of ways, this is what's modeled to us by the people we look up to. What got you to change? Like what got you to want to take a look and see it for what it was?
I don't know if that's true. I think that the breakdown that happens in somebody's life who's given everything that they have to tend to their environment and not to themselves looks different, but I think it's equally painful.
Oh, for sure.
And ultimately can be equally destructive.
But what was it in yours?
In my own?
Yeah.
I think there's many moments of breakdown and awareness, but I will never forget one night. My husband at the time was dealing with repeated brain surgeries and was not okay. And we're actually, I think at that time we were separated. Was not okay. I was raising 3 kids on my own in a city where my family wasn't, although my chosen family or my friends definitely were here for me. But I think that I had told myself that I needed to be mother and father and protect my kids and have them not feel an ounce of anything that was happening. And I was doing a really good job of it.
Yeah.
And then 2 things happened. One night I woke up in the middle of the night and I heard myself saying, "Oh my God, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's coming."
Because you haven't been looking after yourself in all this so far, right?
No.
Yeah. You're
I was out racing fear, actually,
Yeah.
I think.
on the running hard.
And protecting my kids and keeping busy and making their lives look normal. And
Out of a place of love.
100%, but also out of a place of fear.
Yeah.
So it was, I wasn't aware of that piece at that time. And it was, oh my God, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. It's coming. Oh my God, here it is. And then I heard, you don't have the luxury of a nervous breakdown. There's 3 kids downstairs who depend on you. And I remember crying my eyes out and saying, okay, God, then put out your hands and hold me because I'm falling. And I had this image of these giant hands like a hammock that I just fell back in. And I think it was the same week that I was doing a practicum for my counseling degree. And my 2 bosses, I was super busy and I was booked up completely. And I was doing great work, but I had to leave 2 or 3 times in emergencies to race home to my kids because something had happened. And my bosses sat me down and said, we're putting you on leave. It's not an option. And I remember going, but what? I'm doing such a good job. What do you mean? And they said, you're going to burn out. You're going to be in serious trouble if you don't stop.
You had an internal signal and an external signal.
Oh, yeah. And the external signal was really hard because I was avoiding the discomfort and fear in my body by doing what I had always done, which was taking care of the world outside of me. And what they did was put
it away.
Yeah, they put a hard stop.
Yeah.
And I had to feel the terror or the fear that was sitting underneath it. And you know, guys, this was like in 2014. So it's 2025. And I've been walking this work all of these years.
Was that the turning point? Would you say like that? That's distinct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You were very, it sounds like you're right on the edge.
I was right on the edge. And there were other moments leading to that, but that brought me right to the edge. And I've been walking this path for over 11 years specifically. And I look at myself really square in the mirror, and it's taken an awful lot of patience and time to unwind these patterns and to be able to hold myself and ask to be held in them. It's not, it's not a wham bam, thank you, man. And I say it because, because I'm one version of this story. My story has been slow and steady in a lot of ways, and then it speeds up and it's slow and steady because I think that's what my system knows how to handle. Your experience around this is really different. You moved very quickly from the moment of breakdown to where you are today. I have like 30 years of work ahead of you or 30 years of work on you. And in 5 years, you've done more work than I ever dreamed a human being can do. So I think it's worth speaking to that too, in terms of where your story started.
Can I ask you just a couple more questions? In
Yeah.
that place of that turning point. I'm really curious. I'm really curious to know how you felt. What was that place where you're in the verge of an internal nervous breakdown? You've got the external world cutting off, and finally forced to just sit with that feeling and face that feeling. What was that feeling? Like, where did this take you? You know what I mean?
Yeah. To a profound block in my throat, to a feeling of a racing heart, to a feeling like my stomach dropped, and a feeling like I was going to implode. I wanted to rip my skin off. I It brought me into a feeling of absolute terror.
Yeah. And your energy level?
It plummeted.
Yeah.
I got really, I was running on adrenaline.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I
And
just have this
so,
feeling of this gas tank going empty.
yeah, well, I think the gas tank was already
Yeah.
empty.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
running on fumes, and the fumes felt good because the neurochemicals running from my system were leaving me in a place that were protecting me from feeling just how empty I was. And all of a sudden it was like, it was done. I was flat out. Um, and there was nowhere for me to run except inside.
Yeah. And you took on the mission of filling the tank in a sense.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I can say
maybe now. Yeah.
I can say now
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I've
yeah,
definitely taken
yeah,
on a
yeah,
mission to fill the
yeah.
tank and to model what I'm
Just
talking
not run out
about.
of gas. Yeah.
I think I ran on, maybe an eighth of a tank of gas for a really long time.
That's funny.
Yeah. I don't, and that's where I say to you, I don't think it's that different than the realm of addiction, because the idea of facing our pain is so big that to live in anger, reaction, upset, ignorance, suppression is way easier. Or it seems that way. Right? It's actually much harder.
Way harder.
Yeah.
But we don't know it
But
until we know
at that time, it feels like to feel your feelings is Everest.
That's a great place to stop for a break. And we'll see you in the second half. And we are back. And Carol has asked a question. In the world we live in, full of hustling and independent people, how does it affect anyone asking for help? Jacqueline?
Carol, I think it's really hard to ask for help in a world that doesn't model it for us. And the only way that we can begin to shift that is by pausing, taking a breath, and honoring our needs in any given moment and taking a risk. And the interesting piece in my experience is that I'll share this really quickly with you. I had a neighbor when my kids were small who went in for surgery, and she was a really successful woman, and she stroked out during her surgery. She was okay coming out, but she had a much longer recovery. And I remember asking her if she needed anything, and she said, "Oh, I would love one of your salads. And I would love it if you could help me download this book because I can't read right now." And I remember the feeling that I had in my body listening to her. And I remember feeling like, wow, this is grace in action. The act of being able to ask for the help that she needed felt like pure grace to me. And the ability to meet her and be able to help her also felt like an incredible gift to me. And my experience suggests that when one of us asks for help and has the courage to ask for help, all of a sudden we invite a level of vulnerability in the people around us that also learn that it's okay to ask you for help, which then creates an opening and an opening that grows bigger and bigger. But I think that as long as we accept the hustling and bustling and independence that we're living in, we won't break that down for ourselves or for anyone else. I hope that answers your question. So, honey, you've lived most of your life also in a place of not being able to ask for help. And as such, also not able to receive the help that you needed. How did that begin for you? What was your story?
Yeah. And again, I'll just qualify, like you said, it's my story that I look back at now to try to make sense of it all. But my story is one of growing up in an alcoholic home with quite young parents. My mom, in particular, was just turned 18 when I was born, and for the majority of my life that I can remember, she was, quite a heavy alcoholic, and very, very abusive in the sense that it's a mother putting drugs and alcohol, or alcohol in this case, ahead of your child's needs. And growing up in that chaotic environment, it didn't feel safe. It didn't feel safe at all. And in fact, it wasn't safe. So the idea of being okay to ask for help didn't check out, particularly because in the times I do recall asking for help, it didn't come. And that's the lesson I learned growing up, is that it's not okay to ask for help. If I ask for help, it won't come. And I better figure this all out on my own if I want to escape this thing, because nobody's coming to save me. That's sort of my lived experience growing up in an alcoholic household. And it's not that unique. If you're a listener out there that's grown up in a similar household, you're nodding your head right now. And so I took that into my youth. I took that into my adulthood, with this idea that the only way I was going to be safe was if I took control of the situation. And that just led me into my own conditioning, my own patterning of controlling my environment. And the best way to control an environment is to be the best at it, overachieve at it, do more work than other people, find ways to manipulate, find ways to rise to the top. It wasn't okay to not be successful. It wasn't okay at work to ask for help, regardless of what's going on. I need to figure a way to get it done. And that's the background I grew up with, of not asking for help.
It's interesting. Anybody who's listened has heard your story multiple times in different ways. And one of the things that really stands out to me today, as you're speaking, is that it's not just about achievement. I mean, you just went through 2 weeks of being sicker than I've ever seen you. And for you, it was sicker than you've said you've ever remember being. And that pattern shows up when you get unwell too, not just in terms of achievement, but in terms of shutdown.
In terms of anything, yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit more? Because there's something there that I think for people who, I think there's something there that will resonate for people.
Yeah, well, for sure. Like, it's like I guess the achievement or aspect of it, it's a symptom of the underlying belief that I'm not worthy of love. I'm not enough. I'm not important. And the way to become important is to get validation through outside success. But in periods where I'm not feeling well or things aren't going well, the safest thing to do is just to retrench and to hide and not let anyone see me. Right? If this is place of not feeling safe, it's either, if you're out there, you're performing, but if you can't perform, then you best go hide somewhere and not let anyone see you, because you're not safe. The world isn't a safe place. That's the limiting belief.
And so that's beginning to shift for you somewhat.
Yeah.
Can you help them to understand how?
Yeah. And this is the interesting thing. And this is where I brought up earlier this what I see a potential difference between the the male and the masculine and the feminine when it comes to these types of learned behaviors. So I have this I have this very extreme story of growing in an alcoholic family, but I also have what I also think are very masculine tendencies in terms of this ability to ask for help. And what I'm talking about, it's not just when I'm not feeling well or I need help with a project at work. What I'm talking about is the kind of internalizing where if I go back 7 years in sort of this conditioned life I was leading, I wasn't sharing anything that was going on inside me with a friend. My life was a dumpster fire 7 years ago. I had all sorts of issues in every aspect of my life. I wasn't sharing that with anybody. I was keeping all to myself. I was going to therapists and paying them $150 an hour to withhold from them and not tell them what was actually going on in my life. It's this constant belief that throughout my whole life, when things would come up, I'd found a way through them. I did that for 48 years, and I was going to do it through this thing too. That was the learned behavior of survival and overcoming these things, is that it's not safe. Have the internal resources to overcome this thing, so I'll continue to do that. So that's
So what's changed for you in that? Because I mean, I've watched you quite sick a couple of times and I've seen a shift. I know that the groups that you're working with, there's also a big shift there. I want you to help our listeners understand where that shift has happened for you.
yeah. So unlike you told your story about you wake up in the middle of the night with I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. Mine wasn't waking up in the middle of the night. Mine was running. I can do it on my own. I can make this work. I can fix it, to the limit where it took me to an addicted bottom and into a jail cell, and estranged from my family, estranged from my friends, without a job, in a jail cell, facing time in jail. That's the place that my own self-sufficiency and my own trying to do it myself, not asking for help, got me. I got all the way to that spot without asking for help. I got all the way there.
So actually, if I'm going to just listen from this standpoint today, what you got was everything you asked for, which was, I'm alone.
Yeah. I'm alone. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy of love. My fear of abandonment came true.
And so all of the things that
Right.
were driving your car that you were trying to avoid,
That's right.
ultimately brought you to the very place that you were terrified of ever being.
That's right.
Which was completely alone.
Yeah. And just because I was running that car, I was running that tank all the way to empty. And when it totally ran out of gas and the engine actually seized, I kept trying to run the car in that analogy and ended up in that spot. And that place, where I refer to it as the gift of desperation, that happens when come to the full realization that this path I'm taking, where I don't ask for help and I'm going to do it myself with my own thinking, is not going to work anymore. That's that full realization. And that was probably the first day that in my life that I truly asked for help. And I asked for help by getting on my knees and asking help from a higher power. And I'm not a religious person at this stage, or I'm spiritual now, but getting on my knees and asking, the God of my understanding, for help. And taking that from there to realize that I'm gonna ask this higher power for help. And the only way the higher power is going to help me is if I let other people help me. So I'm going to ask God for help, but I better be damn well willing to let other people help me, and I better be able to receive that help. And
can you help me understand that? Yeah. I've never heard you speak it that way before.
Yeah.
Why does surrendering to the God of your understanding mean that you also have to surrender and allow the people around you to help you? Where did that connection come from?
It's interesting. It came in that moment, is that how else is the universe, or how else is God going to operate but through other people? Mm-hmm. If I'm asking God for help, but then I'm going to get up, but Chris is going to run the show about how this is going to go again. It doesn't work. I know that's going to work. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to truly surrender, and I'm going to truly let go of control, trying to let go and making things happen, and let things unfold with the trust that help will come if I ask for it. And I got that trust at that moment. That's what I did. And it started off for me in a treatment center, where that turned into, whatever these folks ask me to do, I'm just going to say yes. Chris's ideas are out the window. Instead of critiquing everything you're doing, instead of being in a group session and trying to be outsmart the counselors, I'm just going to listen to what everyone has to say, accept the help that's given to me, and see what happens. And that started this, I would call it this miraculous progression of surrendering more and more to other aspects of my life as things began to broaden out, whether it's a career, whether it's maybe I should go to school, maybe I should learn this, whether it's should I get into a new relationship with someone showing up in my life. It was always just surrendering, receiving help when it showed up, going from there.
So I hear the progression from rock bottom to that place of growth. The question that I originally asked you was actually a question that was very recent. And I think the reason why I'm asking it is because I think that there's different levels of this. And as we grow and shift, our capacity to be able to ask for what we need or receive for what we need changes. And so you were describing there was something really profound actually about being with you in sickness this time that felt different than you in sickness a year ago. And there was a willingness to be taken care of on some level, an openness to receive that was quite different. And I would love for you to speak to that, because I think it's the subtlety that we're actually trying to get to. These big moments, those moments are huge, but it's the subtlety of everyday life where this actually becomes quite profound.
Yeah, it's the big moments that it's worth mentioning because it's the catalyst, and you're all going to have your own catalyst for what drives the change. And it's the catalyst to see, the horror of the situation. Here's my conditioning. Here's where it's got me to. And now, as you mentioned, whether it's 30 years or whether it's 7 years, this process of bringing awareness and witnessing what that conditioning is. And then the really hard stuff, trying to unwind that conditioning. And how do I do that? So here I am, someone who self-identified, became very clear. Oh, I have an ability to ask for help. I'm trying to control everything. I have all these fears of abandonment, and I think I can solve every problem. Well, I need to do the opposite of that now if I want to undo my conditioning, or else create the mechanisms where I'm aware of when my conditioning is at work. And I'm going to get to the sickness thing. It's a build up to it. But for me, that started with that moment of surrender. But then it moved to the next stage. If this is going to be something that is going to be a new design for living in my life, so I'm just going to not go right back to those old patterns as soon as I'm out of the fear. As soon as things start getting a little bit better again, I'm going to go back to my old ways of trying to control anything. I had to set up my life in a way that I forced myself to ask for help. I forced myself to communicate with people what was going on in my life, what problems I had. Everything wasn't okay. I have lots of issues, and I need to be telling another human being what those things are. And so I started getting myself involved in sponsorship. I had a sponsor I talked to all the time, a therapist, a coach, various different groups in which we'd share all this information as a way to continually get myself out of myself. So now I think I've joked around with you before. When I used to have a problem, nobody would ever know about it. Nobody. Now I have a problem. I guarantee you there's at least 15 other men in particular that know about my problem and are offering advice and solutions and willing to offer help. And I'm willing to receive help from those people because I've made that part of my life.
So Carol asked us a question at the beginning. I think I want to bring that question back to you. In a world that values independence and so much hustling and bustling, how is it that 15 men would know about a challenge that you have, a fear that you have, an issue that you have? How did you create that? How do you have 15 men in your life whose thoughts and ideas and energy presence matters to you?
I went out and found them. Yeah, I went out and made that happen slowly over time to build a network. to, if my life came to this place where I didn't want to, it came to empty, and I was empty on isolation, self-sufficiency, self-sacrifice, and overachievement, then the opposite to me was we're going to create a life of wholeness, which is one of connection, service, helping, and receiving love and help for other people. And what I came, going back to Carol's question, what I came to understand is this, this, and I quote, a world full of hustling and independent people. That was just a story I told myself too, as a function of my conditioning to convince myself that help wouldn't come if I asked. Now, if we came where we started, where everyone is a little bit wrapped up in this place where it's hard for them to receive help and ask for help, there's a lot more willingness to help other people out there than we're leading ourselves to believe. I've found when I ask for help, it comes in from every single direction. There are more people that I ever imagined that are not only willing to help me, but excited to help me. Much in the same way when someone asks me for help, I'm absolutely delighted to help them. And I think that's in fact the general human condition is we love the opportunity to help other people, but we tell ourselves a story that we're not worthy of help. We're not worthy of love. It doesn't apply to us because that's the fear-based conditioning that we live under. That's simply not true.
Yeah. And I think that's beautiful. You spoke that really, really beautifully. And it comes back to that story that I shared about my neighbor. The feeling that I received, the feeling that I got in my body when she asked the question was of, wow, this is such grace. The capacity to be able to ask for what we need. We will rush to fill those spaces for each other. We want to know how to support and love each other. But we all first need to be able to actually tap into what that need is for ourselves.
Yeah.
And it often happens only once the well that we drink from dries up before we recognize that we too need help. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's again, it's just like we talked about a little bit in the last podcast, this idea of, it from our conditioned minds, it feels selfish to put our needs first, to put our oxygen mask on first, to do something that's for us. But it's like as we're these other acts of self-sacrifice, these other acts of discounting our needs, they just begin to leave the tank empty. It's just a matter of time. And it's these other selfish acts of self-care that then begin to fill the tank again. This is what needs to happen. But our conditioning keeps telling us we're not worth it, or it won't come, and we'll have to face our fears to do it, as you talked about.
Yeah, I think you spoke that really beautifully again. And we can't actually give what we don't have.
Yeah.
So, this whole idea of being on this wheel of self sacrifice where we're constantly empty, like we're running on empty, what we're actually giving is coming from an empty place. And that emptiness doesn't actually create compassion and empathy and love and peace. It creates chaos and resentment and drama. And so this whole idea of you've referred to this idea of selfish acts or even selfishness is we absolutely need to be tending to and filling our gas tank if we want to tend to and take care of the people around us, because we cannot give what we don't have. One of our teachers talks a lot about this whole idea of compassion, and compassion is an overflow of your heart. It doesn't happen when the energy in your heart is empty.
Yeah, it's passion for everyone, including you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, and this idea, a big thing that showed up for me when I took a really hard look at my conditioning is self-sacrifice, in a sense, and putting other people's needs first was a big part of this thing. And it left me feeling empty, that I'd have to go fill that tank with other maladaptive behaviors and addiction and drinking and stuff like that. But when I really get to the root of why was I doing this stuff, like why was I addicted to coaching, sports, and killing myself doing all this other stuff, I wanted people to love me. It was just, it was another mechanism of control in my life. That's why I was doing it. It wasn't really a selfless act. It was, a self-sacrifice that was feeding the ego's addiction.
And be gentle,
Mhm.
because the little boy that wanted to be loved, that didn't get
Of
that
course.
love, was the one who was doing all of those things,
Yeah.
seeking love. And so this idea of just speaking about it from the standpoint of it was my, it was driven by my need to control. It was driven by a need to be loved.
Yeah.
And
fear.
yeah. And each one of us has those drivers. They might look a little bit different, but they all kind of hang out together. And so there's a tenderness with which we need to address these things in ourselves, and a tenderness with which we need to address each other. Because as we break out of our old patterning and begin to ask for what we need, or open our door to receive the help that's offered to us, we have to remember that we're all these little kids dressed up as adults. And it's that aspect of ourself, that really vulnerable aspect of ourself, that is opening a door. And so as we do that, we need to meet each other with a tremendous amount of tenderness, or we'll all shut down again.
Yeah.
Right? Go ahead.
I was going to say, and it's tenderness, and I think the other thing that it shows up a lot in the work I do, in the rooms I go in. Humor is this amazing element for this, right? Because in a sense, like we're these little kids. I'm going to laugh when saying it. We're these little kids pretending to be grown up clothes on and going to work with our briefcases, but we're these little kids, and we've got these little kids' emotions and these little kid fears, and we don't know it. Or you don't know it, and I didn't know it. And when you wake up to it, at first it's like you sort of wake to the horror and like, oh my God, but then you can't help but laugh at it and see the ridiculousness of the predicament.
Well, I think we can help but laugh at it. But actually, I think laughing at it and recognizing the insanity of it and being able to laugh at ourselves is what helps us walk. Is what helps us walk it with ease.
Yeah, it's
right?
it's the human condition. And there's so much of it
100%.
it's the suffering, it's the joy, it's the messiness, it's all of it. We have to laugh, we have to cry, but that's how we get through it. And I was just going to say, like, the thing that I think, as we're wrapping up the show here, I think a tool that really helps, a real high level macro tool that really helps in this is the posture of humility in all this. And as a definition of humility, it's just so profound for me. It's both knowing my own limitations and having the ability to ask for help at the same time. And if we can get really honest with ourselves in terms of what are my limitations, where am I running up against these things that I'm struggling with, and then finding the courage, and it absolutely is courage, to break the conditioning, ask for help, life gets a whole lot more peaceful.
Well, and the truth is that when you break that conditioning and ask for help, all of a sudden what you're actually doing is opening yourself up to a field of energy that's been longing to fill you for as long as you've been here. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Take care, everyone.
You've been listening to me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, on Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living.
Tune in every second and fourth Monday at 3 p.m. on Transformation Talk Radio for more real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal. How to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and the masculine, you will learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow, and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
For more information or to connect with us personally, visit theway-healing.com. That's theway-healing.com.